Former President Donald Trump is currently the most popular politician in all of America. It's according to a brand new Harvard Harris poll. The findings say that a total of 42% have a favorable opinion of former President Trump. That puts him, as you see here, 2 points behind Bernie Sanders and 3 points ahead of former Vice President Mike Pence. And Joe Biden and Kamala Harris also trailing there. Joining us to discuss some of these new poll numbers is Newsmax political analyst Mark Halperin. Mark, great to have you with us today. Thanks for joining me.
Good to see you, Bianca. Thank you.
Okay, so I want to ask you, Trump, the most popular politician. Wow. So even with Cassidy Hutchinson and J6, it seems like he is unaffected by at least this poll. What do you make of it?
I think a lot of the press coverage would have you believe that Donald Trump can't possibly be the Republican nominee in 2024 or couldn't possibly win a general election. I think these numbers suggest that that is wishful thinking on a part of the press that doesn't like Donald Trump. He's certainly undergone some diminishment in his standing with some elites and even some voters. But as the numbers you showed suggest, he's still doing quite well overall as compared to some other politicians. And that's out of office where, he's not being particularly disciplined in how he approaches trying to raise his numbers. So those numbers are clustered up. They're within the margin of error. So it's not some cataclysmic thing, but it does show that, again, those who want to write Donald Trump's political obituary are ignoring data.
They are ignoring data. And I know usually you do the data that matter, the data that don't, but John's off today. So we're just going to stay with this theme here because I also want to go with this Emerson poll. And it shows Trump with a big lead in a potential matchup here. Look at this, 55%. You've got DeSantis with 20, Pence with 9. And again, it does come down to what is this MAGA movement. And Mark, interestingly enough, we do a lot with these memes here. Even after the January 6th, they supposedly had this bombshell, star witness here. But all the memes were kind of, about Donald Trump, being a cool, bad guy here in the car. And if that's a pulse of what, mainstream folks out there are thinking, not the media, it doesn't appear that, they're taking this serious and they see this as a completely orchestrated attack against Donald Trump and to smear him.
I think people who want to understand how those hearings are playing with real people, as opposed to people in Chevy Chase, Maryland, and Englewood, New Jersey, should get in a car and drive to a diner in Green Bay and listen to what people are talking about. Doesn't mean the content of the hearings isn't important. It doesn't mean it won't play a factor in our politics going forward. But it does mean that within the Republican Party, at least, Donald Trump is still the dominant figure, regardless of what's being said in that hearing room.
Right. You do say, there is somewhat of a fracture happening among some of you, let's say the elites and some of these really big donors in the GOP, which they're not going on the record, right? But as you know, some people behind the scenes are saying, they want to see some other people come up for 2024. Yeah. If you had to forecast the race right now, it is early, but there's been some speculation that Trump might even announce early to sort of be counteroffensive. What's the strategy of him doing that, Mark?
He's an impatient man. I think most people in Republican politics, even ones who want him to be president, are urging him to hold off, to not announce. But there's obviously the capacity to intimidate other people, to force other people out of the race. And I think also, although Donald Trump will certainly run to the front of the parade and take credit for positive results from the Republicans in the midterm, if he's an announced candidate for president, I think he would rightfully be able to take more of the credit because his name would not be literally on the ballot, but it would be more front and center. So most Republicans I know, as I said, don't want him to announce, but I see why he's fascinated by it because he likes to do things in an unorthodox way. And again, he's an impatient man.
Yep. And, every rally that he holds, there's one coming up in Alaska this weekend, which I'll be covering. You'll probably be with us as well. Everybody's always on the edge of their seat going like, would he announce? Would he announce? It does seem like there is a risk if he goes out too early, though.
Yeah. Look, one of the risks is he's then subject to campaign contribution limits and limits on what he can spend money on if he's an announced candidate. That's why you saw Vice President Harris walk back something she said that made it seem like Joe Biden was a quasi-announced candidate. In addition, I think a lot of Republicans do not want to spend the midterm race talking about Donald Trump. They want to spend it talking about Joe Biden's record on the economy, inflation, crime, immigration. And the more Donald Trump's front and center, the harder that'll be. So there's a downside for the party. There's a downside for him. But I come back to Donald Trump likes to control things. He likes to be in charge. He doesn't like to let other people set the tempo, the pace, the cadence. And
well,
so when people tell him, yeah, go ahead.
It makes it very interesting, and he's still doing it, even not being an announced candidate. We're almost out of time, but I want to get your reaction to this article that Mitt Romney penned for The Atlantic. It's interesting, some of the comments he made. Some people say, what was his goal here? He says that President Joe Biden is a genuinely good man, but has been able to break through our national malady of denial, deceit, and distrust. A return of Donald Trump would feed the sickness, probably rendering it incurable. I guess if you couple that with some of the comments we've heard from Liz Cheney on the Sunday morning shows, talking, poorly about Trump, they're really trying to frame a narrative that they're hoping will get some momentum, I guess, and sway some minds. Will this have any weight, do you think, Mark?
Well, I think a phrase that Dick Morris helped popularize, triangulation, is what's at play here. Mitt Romney wants to set himself separate from and above both Joe Biden's record and Donald Trump's record. He wants to be seen as someone who's thinking about the American people over the failed policies and controversies involved with our two previous presidents, whether that means he wants to run for president or not. I think that's where Mitt Romney feels comfortable. And I think that's where the donor community in the Republican Party is as well. And that's a constituency that Mitt Romney knows a lot about.
Well, there you go. Mark Halperin, always great to see you. Thank you so much for bringing us some light on what these poll numbers mean and, what we're looking at. It is always very exciting and interesting, especially as we wait for what Donald Trump could or could not announce. Mark, good to see you.